Okay, so this video is talking about the Democrats sounding an alarm that Trump is planning to slash federal government. And I was looking at the comments. Some of them were hilarious, but then some of them were truth telling. And, the ways I see it, it's like it's a whirlwind of chaos. And so I always look at it as Republicans and Democrats are one and the same. It's just one will say something for an opposing side, and the other will say something for the defensive side, and people kind of follow suit. And here, this is in Yahoo by Alexander Nazarian, and so this just came out, and you know what the federal government is entailed. The government programs usually end up being the programs that he ends up slashing. The ways I see it, it usually ends up being programs for people that are in local communities. And here it says in Washington, a congressional hearing on reforming the federal bureaucracy devolved into a rancor on Wednesday morning, with some Democrats charging that the Trump administration is trying to privatize essential government functions, including the U.S. Postal Service, without any compelling reasons to do so. So it goes on talking about some of these government programs. And it usually ends up being programs that, people who don't make very much money usually end up having to use. So in one particularly tense exchange, Senator Claire McCaskill sharply interrupted the sole witness testifying before the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, Margaret Richer, a high-ranking deputy at the Office of Management and Budget, after having grown exasperated by what she had saw as Richard's evasive answers. Well, you're not going to get very far if you don't give us the data. So a visibly frustrated Catskill caution, I'm just telling you, it's not going to happen. Okay, so I'm getting that she wants to see what's your reason in slashing these programs, and how is it going to, prove that things are going to be better. And so you need to show us some type of proof or some data, statistical data, showing us how is this reorganizing the federal government going to help in any way. So President Trump's first proposed reorganizing a federal government less than 2 months after taking office. The executive order signed March 13, 2017. He directed it, OMB, to propose a plan to reorganize government functions and eliminate unnecessary, as he coined it, agencies. So let's see what those agencies are. That plan was released last month, and it includes several controversial proposals among 32 alignment priorities. Okay, among them combining the Department of Labor with the Department of Education, moving supplemental nutrition assistance program commonly known as food stamps under the purview of the Department of Health and the Human Services, and perhaps most controversial, turning over the post office to privatize management. And so those are things that commonly people, all over, in your cities and your towns, so people are using these agencies. And so who does it usually complain about some of these agencies? Taxpayers, and usually people who make relatively good income, or they're doing well off. Usually the wealthy complain that some of these programs are interfering with their tax dollars. And so we've heard that on many occasions. And so Wednesday offered that the Trump administration a chance to tout its progress to legislators. Okay, so, and though the committee chairman, Ron Johnson, opened the hearing gamely, asking members of the audience if they thought that the federal government has or was hopelessly or unwieldy, most agreed it was the mood darkened with McCaskill's intense criticism of a process she describes as opaque and impervious to the necessary scrutiny of Congress. So Richard defended herself from the former executive and other police had not held a government position under or until her 2017 nomination to the OMB, where she is now the deputy director of management. And so she cast herself as a seasoned executive who could bring the sprawling federal apparatus to 430 separate departments, 2.79 million employees, a budget of 4 trillion under some measures of control. So I cringe when I hear how inefficient it is for Americans to interact with the government due to layers of organization bureaucrats. And so this is not how Americans want their government to operate, Richard said. At one point, she describes her task by borrowing an acronym used by Senator James Lankford, BHAG, which stands for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. So, but she could not erase the Democrats' memories of one-time White House political strategist Stephen K. Bannon promising destruction of the administrative state. And so, or of Trump's well-known animosity to bureaucracy he believes is rife with deep state enemies of his administration. During the presidential campaign, Trump suggested that he might entirely eliminate environmental, which is the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, which has to do with climate change, and the Department of Education as well, which has to do with schools. And so I already feel like he's eliminated the EPA. They don't really do anything anyway. The people they got doing anything are really not doing anything. You don't really hear them talking about them doing anything to combat the issues or debates surrounding the climate change. And to try to, do things differently that will reflect people of the future, like the children of the future, that they'll have a better world to live in. Like right now, you don't really see them talking about how they're going to propose ways to, lessen smog, or how they're going to propose ways to lessen certain issues that are involving the climate's change. The summers have grown much hotter. And, what kinds of things are they going to do in terms of making things better? But a lot of people feel like their taxpayer dollars are going into that, and it's useless because it doesn't exist. There is no such thing as climate change. And that's what we've heard. And then with education, you've had lots of teachers that are complaining about their pay, that they're not being paid what their job entails, and they're shaping the future. They're shaping your future voters and your future probably would be doctors, lawyers, and future politicians, people who will help shape the world, and they don't really get compensated for the developing minds that they're helping to shape. So they're getting underpaid, and maybe a lack of benefits or less benefits or mediocre benefits. And they're underappreciated as educators. They're most educated, but most underappreciated in terms of profession. And so this makes it, it goes into, during the presidential campaign, Trump suggested that he might entirely eliminate these programs, okay? And so I kind of feel like he's kind of not really said much about them. So that's my way of saying that. It seems like he's already mentally eliminated them. And many agencies are so severely understaffed that the White House recently resorted to a job fair to attract federal employees. And so, I've seen where, post office lines are really long. And when you go to some of these offices, you're standing in long lines. And there's, the DMV, you stand in long, long lines, and it takes a long time before you're seen. And then, sometimes you call certain agencies, you're put on hold forever, and then it shifts you to another agency. And so those are the problems that some people have mentioned. But it was thus understandable that suspicions ran high on Wednesday. I'm worried about a sledgehammer coming in, said Doug Jones. So Maggie Hansen echoed the worries of liberals who believe that a consolidation of the labor and education departments would be nothing more than a means to vitiate both. And so the administration has a track record of chipping away at workers' protections, Hansen said, so students and workers will presumably be left with no champion if the two departments are combined and allegedly redundant programs are eliminated. And so while Richard expressed no overt political ideology, presenting herself as capable technocrat, she could not escape the fact that conservative groups have long advocated for reducing the scope of the federal government. And we know, and usually they always go for the smaller programs that are geared toward people who are almost either they're in poverty or they're next to poverty. And so we know a lot of these came from the Heritage McCaskill, said bitterly, referencing the Conservative Heritage Foundation. They gave us a Supreme Court nominee, and they now are giving us government proposals, which, if you guys don't know, the Supreme Court nominee, which was Brett Kavanaugh. So they're now giving us the government proposals, so we have the right to know where the proposals came from. The Heritage Foundation provided the Trump campaign with a list of conservative jurists, and both of the Trump nominees to the Supreme Court have come from that roster. So, in other words, there's this agenda that they always want right-wing conservative or people who are on board with the Trump campaign or the Trump conservatives. And so they usually pick people who are geared towards the same mindset as they are politically. So George Scott, a Heritage Foundation spokesman, told Yahoo News that the think tank is pleased that the lawmakers from both sides of the aisle recognize the Heritage Foundation for our effective work advocating for sound conservative ideas and numerous policy ideas. Okay, let me say that again. Conservative ideas. They don't want liberal ideas. They don't want anything having to do with, people who are on the left or who are on terms with, equality for all. No, it's more conservative ideas. And so they want that to be pretty set in stone there. An administration official disputed the characterization of the OMB plan as a heritage brainchild. The claim that this heritage plan is a disservice to our dedicated career civil servants, he said, who spent a year combing through public government accountability office. Inspector General reports as well as citizen submissions in order to craft a proposal would help make the federal government more efficient, effective, and accountable. Okay. So Trump is certainly not the first president to attempt taming the bureaucratic beast. Back in 1993, President Bill Clinton promised a federal government that puts a premium on speed and function and service, not rules and regulations. Okay. So 19 years later, Obama vowed to make our government leaner, smarter, and more consumer friendly. Okay, so if those efforts have been successful, there would be little left for Trump to reorganize. So just how much Trump can accomplish is unclear. So Todd Richard asserted that there were some dozen proposals that the administration intended to act on unilaterally. She did not say what those proposals were, of course, or when they would be implemented. So Norman J. Olson Ornstein, a congressional expert of the Libertarian American Enterprise Institute, told Yahoo News that the most of what they are trying to do is moving major programs, altering and renaming departments. Okay, so that can't be done without Congress. So Congress has to approve it first. And there is no way Congress will agree on it, including, for example, Republicans in the Agricultural Committee, but also all Democrats in the Senate. Okay, so that could leave the reorganizing as imperiled as its predecessors. So as the mood in the hearing room soured, Johnson and of the Wisconsin Republican bemoaned the partisan rancor that he viewed as having been instigated by the Catskill. He also defended Richards, arguing that the reorganization plan was still in its early stages, so Mick Catskill was not mollified and wondered what the purpose of the congressional hearing was, if not to ask difficult questions. So Max Sear, chief executive of Partnership for Public Service, had previously praised Richard hiring, but on Wednesday, he voiced support for congressional oversight for her work. Congress plays an essential role in evaluating the administration's reorganization proposal, so Steer told Yahoo News this. Today's hearing was an important step in helping Congress better understand the administration's plan and assessing its impact on American people. So it is imperative that the Congressional Committee of Jurisdiction have access to the information they need and exercise their oversight responsibilities in shaping federal agencies and programs. For all the discord nobody presents at Wednesday's hearing dared describe the federal government as a model of efficacy or efficiency. Okay, so something needs to be done, but as is infrequently the case in Washington, there is little agreement on what that should be or who should pay for it. We have multiple government agencies that oversee catfish, said Senator Gary Peters. I don't think we need that. I want them to have one agency that makes sure catfish is safe when I eat it. So in this, that's sort of like how would you say, like an analogy? You know, you don't need all these other government, these smaller entities to deal with one problem. Whereas if you could have one entity deal with one initial problem, without all these other agencies, smaller agencies intervening in that. So in this age of incessant rancor, catfish safety may be the best Congress can do. Okay, so it just seems like some of the comments that came out of this, some sound a little bit hilarious, and then others sound like they're a little bit frustrated or perturbed by the whole situation. So these are a few of the comments. Meanwhile, members of Congress are ready to vote on a pay increase, and to ensure free health care for its members is not affected. So today I call SS to get an appointment at a local office. It goes to a call center, which is another little agency. Okay, so I was told my local office failed to show any times open for appointments, but the local office would call me to set up an appointment in 1 week. A week to make an appointment, not a week to get an appointment. A week to return a call. So that's their point in this. It just doesn't make any sense. And so the new VA hospital set to open in Denver is 3 years behind schedule and $1 billion over what it was supposed to cost. Okay, GSA at its finest. Okay, so there were more comments. The post office is specifically named in the Constitution. Okay, Meaning, like, why would you get rid of these programs or either try to privatize these programs when these programs are much needed? Some people fight back and forth. Some of them feel like some of the comments is like, why do you got to wait so long to have certain services happen when you shouldn't have to wait that long and have your phone call routed to all these different numbers before you get any service. And then you have issues surrounding certain agencies that are things that are needed, but yet they try to keep scaling. They've already scaled back on them enough as it is, even really to the extent that you can't scale back anymore. But they want to now scale back again. It just doesn't make any sense. So this right here, I'm going to go to this one. It says this from an article at downsizinggovernment.org. The Congressional Budget Office, CBO, which is CBO, projects that federal spending will rise from 20.7% of gross domestic product, which is GDP, in 2017 to 23.4% by 2027 under a current law. One. Sadly, only the DC is going from 5% increase in funding to 3%, considered a 40% cut. And then this person just simply said, vote 2018. Okay, government should be working for us, but it has grown so large that we have begun working to maintain it. Why is it that the government keeps spending more money than it brings in? Okay, compelling reason. How about because the government is the only entity that can take $1 billion project and turn it into a $10 billion project? Why do we keep hearing about Social Security cuts, but not welfare cuts? And so you know where that might be coming from. So it's like a lot of stuff, a lot of different comments that reflect different ideals. And so some people think we should cut more of those, programs that are geared towards people who are living below the poverty level. And then some people think that we should cut some of the smaller programs that when you want help for certain things or you need to call certain factions in your government, it takes a week just to make an appointment or a week just to hear from people. It's unreal. It's like they've already downsized a lot in a lot of those programs. So what are your thoughts and your feedback on this? Everybody's got different ideas on what they think, but I think sometimes that both Republicans and Democrats are not really that much different in some areas. I think there's also hidden agendas, some things that people are not really, really seeing. And I feel like, as long as, the way people approach things like this, as long as it doesn't affect their lives or people that they're close to or themselves, they're pretty much self-absorbed. And, but if it affects their life in some way, they claim they're for people who don't have. I doubt that to be the case. A lot of this is just so they can get votes, so they can stay paid. And so a lot of times you'll see a lot of these types of blown up ads like this. But there's two sides to every coin. There's one side that says that we need to keep these things in place, and then others say we need to scale back more. Some say we've already scaled back. How can we make it more efficient and more effective and more, accessible to American people? So there's a lot to be debated on these issues, but I feel like it all boils down to money. And then if you just shift over here and you look at the website, economy and jobs, if you look at what it talks about the budget, It says our national debt is well over $20 trillion, that now is the time to reverse the trend of climbing government spending. The president federal budget commits to restraint while prioritizing funding to rebuild our national defense and strengthen America's borders. So he's more concerned about building the army and the national defense and strengthening the borders, and in doing so, you're going to have to, focus our channel taxpayer dollars and money towards these programs rather than the smaller entity programs. And so those are the ones that get hit hardest. They scale back. That downsizing to me is when you're going to basically put more people out of work. And here, if you look at this, where it says an economy, which is just a similar budget, it's saying here, which is totally doesn't seem like it's real, because we still have problems with people not being able to make ends meet. We have homeless problems here in America. If you read this, it makes it sound like everything is going well. So economy and jobs, the economy has come roaring back to life under President Trump. The stock market has hit record highs after record high, helping more Americans build wealth. No, more wealthy Americans build wealth and secure their futures, is what it should say. Through the needed tax cuts and reform, the administration will bring jobs back to our country. Right. Okay, that's what his campaign's usually about, but we don't really see a lot of that happening just yet. The president is helping U.S. workers by expanding apprenticeship programs, reforming job training, bringing businesses and educators together, and ensuring high quality classroom instruction and on the job training. Wow. Okay, so that must be a mission, because the only thing I see helping is the rich staying more rich. And when they talk about anything having to do with tax cuts, it benefits wealthy people, not people that are struggling. And so these big issues, the opioid crisis, immigration, budget, national security, economy, national security, homeland security, rebuilding U.S. deterrence, keeping terrorists out, of course, right? Preserve peace through strength must be our nation's top priority. Unprecedented era of peace that followed the World War II, revealing that the free world is the safest when America is strongest. That's what we want, but that's not what that summit, that Russian summit reflected. Didn't reflect that, did it? It reflected where it made us look weak. The slow depletion of our military in recent years has resulted in the escalation of threats the world over, which President Trump is committed to reversing. And that is not what it felt like during that summit that he just had with President Putin. There was a lot of controversial comments. And so we did not see that. It made us look like we were weak, and like we were, in agreement with Russia, and that they weren't really posing any threat. When we clearly had, they had proof that the votes had been hacked, that there was meddling in the election in 2016. And that is where we're at right now. And so this doesn't look well at all. But anyway, the original article is out of Yahoo by Alexander Nazarian. And so it's always talking about slashing government and slashing federal government and slashing this and slashing that. And who does it end up affecting? It ends up affecting, usually it always goes to the programs that people are living, either they're right at poverty level or below the poverty level. And what are your thoughts and feedback on this? This is not a surprise to me. It just means that it's just another excuse to cut more programs that are much needed. And so this is really hard on people as it is to begin with, but not on people who know that they have benefits. They have good dental and medical and vision, and they have retirement planned out, and they're in a secure situation. And you got people who are their lives are hanging on a balance. Basically, all they have left is some of these programs, because if they didn't have these programs, they would be more people pitching tents on the street and more people out of work looking for jobs just to make ends meet. Thoughts, comments, feedback? Thanks for listening.